welcome back to Whole Person Care webinar series. I, again, am Dr. Holly Lucille, licensed naturopathic doctor and senior medical advisor here at FullScript. And our second session, again, through mitochondrial health, addressing mitochondrial health. And in this session, we're going to explore evidence-based nutraceutical strategies to support mitochondrial function in clinical practice. So next slide. This session is led by Dr. Sarah Douglas. I hope I said that okay.
Douglas, yep.
Got you. Okay. Douglas, a licensed naturopathic doctor and clinical consultant at Research Nutritionals is her role. And in her role, she educates healthcare providers globally, spearheads product innovation, and creates impactful clinical resources to support practitioner success. Yay. So before we get started, again, just a reminder, you can submit your questions in the chat. We're going to address as many as possible. We always get so many, and I get thrilled about them, but we don't have a lot of time to cover them all. So we're going to have a fix for that. Also, there will be a recording and a copy of the presentation slides is actually available right now for download in the files section of the webinar platform. So you can download those and take some notes on there. And then again, thanks for joining us. And Doctor, take it away.
Thanks, Dr. Holly. I appreciate it. All right, so we have our disclaimer there. Okay, so like Dr. Holly said, I'm Dr. Sarah Douglas. I'm the clinical consultant with Research Nutritionals. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the company, our CEO and founder, Dennis Schoen, founded Research Nutritionals in 2005 with the goal not only to back our formulas by ingredient research during formulation, but really to prove efficacy through peer-reviewed published research on the finalized products. So we leverage multiple mechanisms of action to support complex health challenges. And as of this past year, we're now available on FullScript. So that's really exciting. So let's just hop right in here. Now, the objectives for today are essentially to summarize the core functions of mitochondria, kind of describe some of the structural and functional importance of mitochondrial membranes specifically, explain how mitochondrial dysfunction contributes to various disease states, understand the science behind some of the supportive ingredients for mitochondrial health, and discuss the role of glutathione in protecting mitochondrial health as well. So mitochondria have many roles beyond just ATP production like we learn in middle school, essentially. So one of those is reactive oxygen species signaling and redox homeostasis. So mitochondria are naturally producing reactive oxygen species when they make energy. These kind of act as tiny messengers that help the body to adapt to stress. So they're really involved in cellular signaling, but they can be harmful in excess. So that's why we really need to keep things running smoothly, have adequate antioxidants, all of that good stuff. Now, also involved in calcium homeostasis. So they help control the amount of calcium inside cells, which of course is important for many functions like muscle movement, heart function, communication between cells. They also regulate apoptosis. So a healthy mitochondria can actually sense when a cell is under stress or has become damaged beyond repair. And this can be due to excessive oxidative stress, DNA damage, infections, etc. And it signals the cell to start that apoptotic process. Also really interesting, metabolic flexibility. So mitochondria are really good at switching between different types of fuel. So they can use glucose, fat, ketones, and really just depending on what the cell needs at any given moment. And so this flexibility really helps them to adapt to different situations, like when we're eating, when we're fasting, when we're exercising. And similarly, mitochondrial dynamics. This is kind of the quality control mechanism of the mitochondria. So mitochondria are constantly splitting into smaller parts in a process called fission. And the healthy parts are joined back together in a process called fusion. And those unhealthy parts of mitochondria are then removed by a process called mitophagy, where those damaged pieces are recognized by the cell and removed. And that helps to keep things running smoothly. It helps to keep only healthy mitochondria running all at once. And so really important for that quality control mechanism to be working properly. And another role of mitochondria is biogenesis. So this is really the process where cells create new healthy mitochondria to replace the old or damaged ones. And that ensures that the cell has enough energy to function properly. So really interesting is that when we put our body under stress, like positive stress, meaning things like exercise and cold plunges, this can actually activate AMPK. And that signal will go to the nucleus, trigger the activation of the SIRT1 enzyme, and that will trigger mitochondrial biogenesis. So, this is one of the benefits on a cellular level of those practices. So, just going over quickly basic mitochondrial membrane anatomy. So the outer mitochondrial membrane, it contains porins, which are little channels that allow the passage of ions and small molecules from the cytosol to the mitochondria. Um, Now, the inner mitochondrial membrane, alternatively, is impermeable to most ions. So it's highly folded into these structures known as cristae, which increase the surface area for biochemical reactions like oxidative phosphorylation, the electron transport chain. So really important to have nice, robust cristae. So in the process of transferring electrons in the electron transport chain on that inner membrane, energy is released and protons are pumped from the mitochondrial matrix to that intermembrane space. And this creates an electrochemical gradient. And I like to think about that gradient kind of like a battery. It's storing energy that's eventually going to be used to create ATP when we need it. And NAD and FAD will result there. And those act as electron receptors in the Krebs cycle for those dehydrogenase reactions. So all keeps everything kind of functioning properly. Now, what are some of the causes of mitochondrial dysfunction? So, of course, there's primary causes. So we can have genetic issues in our nuclear genes or our mitochondrial DNA. Sometimes these are acquired mutations like we see through aging, for example. But lots of times we're seeing secondary causes. So I bolded here chronic inflammation and oxidative stress because these are really at the core of what's going to lead to mitochondrial dysfunction. So the reactive oxygen species that are generated during that cellular respiration process, again, in excess, will damage the membranes, the proteins, the mitochondrial DNA. And then we kind of get this vicious cycle because that will lead to full blown mitochondrial dysfunction, which underlies many different chronic diseases. And then those chronic diseases then feed into that cycle further of that oxidative stress and inflammation. And there's many underlying causes of this. So, it could be nutrient deficiencies like our B vitamins, magnesium, CoQ10, that are essential for that mitochondrial energy production. Again, it could be aging. So our function declines, we start to accumulate DNA damage, and we have the reduced ability to repair mitochondria. So again, that idea of mitochondrial dynamics comes back into play. That quality control mechanism is just not working anymore. We can even see overexercising. Athletes, for example, who might not be getting the proper nutrition to kind of fuel their body the way it needs to be. Sedentary lifestyle, poor metabolic health, chronic infections, even environmental toxins. So heavy metals, other pollutants, mycotoxins, mold, even certain medications that are commonly prescribed. So we have statins, NSAIDs, SSRIs, antibiotics. All of these can impact the mitochondria. Now, this isn't an all-inclusive list, but it gives you a pretty good idea about how common mitochondrial dysfunction can actually be. And this is just a list of some of the conditions related to mitochondrial dysfunction. As you can see, it's all different bodily systems. And really, the list goes on here. I often tell people, if you type in any disease state into Google followed by mitochondrial dysfunction, you're probably going to find something. Now, what do we do about it? So, one thing that I think is often overlooked in treating mitochondrial dysfunction and lots of different pathologies is focusing on the membranes. Because in reality, we can pump all of the CoQ10 we want into a cell. But if the membranes are not intact, then that CoQ10 is not getting anywhere. It's not going to be doing much. And so this is where phospholipids come in. So as we know, our mitochondrial membranes and our cellular membranes in general are comprised of phospholipids. And so we have things like phosphatidylcholine, ethanolamine, inositol, phosphatidylserine. All of these are major structural components of the mitochondrial membranes, and they help to maintain fluidity, stability, support that surface area of the cristae that we talked about. And really, collectively, these phospholipids are essential for the structural and functional homeostasis of mitochondria. So you'll see in the diagram there in yellow that there's Cl. Now that stands for cardiolipin, and this is a phospholipid that's unique to mitochondria. And typically we don't find this as a supplement, but this can actually be supported through fatty acids like linoleic acid, for example, which is a major component of cardiolipin, and DHA. So these can kind of serve as key acyl chain substrates for cardiolipin remodeling. And so, we can supplement with the phospholipids and support that cardiolipin in different ways. Now, once we actually get those membranes intact and working properly, we want to be able to protect the membranes. And remember, if we have too much oxidative stress, which we're all going to be exposed to oxidative stress and inflammatory insults on a regular basis, kind of just in our daily life, we need to really make sure that that's well in balance. We have proper antioxidants to assist with that. So glutathione, of course, is our master antioxidant. It's an intracellular antioxidant found in all cells, and it's a tripeptide that's composed of 3 amino acids, so glutamate, cysteine, and glycine. And really, glutathione is going to scavenge and neutralize our free radicals, modulate immune responses, help to regenerate other antioxidants in the body. It transports toxins out of our cells, so real huge role in that detoxification process, protecting our vital organs, and really supporting mitochondrial function. So it helps to scavenge and neutralize those free radicals that maybe the mitochondria are putting out too much of. So thereby, it's going to protect those membranes from that oxidative damage. And likewise, healthy mitochondria actually ensure efficient glutathione recycling in the cell. So really, we want to support both of these for optimal health overall. And this diagram just shows some diseases with links to low glutathione. So we can see that there's many different systems that can be impacted here. Now, just some additional nutritional strategies when it comes to supporting mitochondrial health. First and foremost, we know CoQ10. It's going to be that electron carrier in the electron transport chain. It's also antioxidant, so it's going to protect those membranes from oxidative damage as well. PQQ, this is actually going to stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis. And interestingly, it also supports mitochondrial mass. So the bigger our mitochondria are, the more electron transport chain reactions we can have occurring at once, and the more ATP we're going to produce. So really interesting ingredient there. Also our B vitamins, of course, these are really important cofactors for energy production. So we have vitamin B1, it's a cofactor for our rate limiting enzymes in the Krebs cycle. B2, that's comprising complex 1 of the electron transport chain. So it's going to facilitate that electron donation. Vitamin B3, that's a precursor to NADH, which is our electron donor. So really important to have that B complex of vitamins to support these processes. Now, just some research highlights here. So there was a peer-reviewed published 8-week clinical study on a comprehensive mitochondrial support formula that contains phospholipids, CoQ10, PQQ, among other ingredients. And this demonstrated a 52% improvement in energy levels after just 2 months, and actually 35% improvement after just 1 week. The researchers also reported a 19% reduction in TNF alpha, so that inflammatory marker, a 68% improvement in sleep, and a 31% improvement in mental functioning. So the researchers kind of concluded that if you're reducing inflammation, you're going to be reducing that neuroinflammation, thereby promoting better sleep and mental functioning. And so it's interesting because we think of mitochondria as producing energy, but this is a bit different from a stimulant, for example. So we're really looking on the cellular level to promote all of these different areas of health. So a really interesting study there. Another research highlight, a peer-reviewed published 2-week clinical study that was conducted at Penn State on an oral liposomal glutathione formula demonstrated a 28% increase in intracellular glutathione levels, and that was measured in the red blood cell. So that's really important because remember, glutathione is an intracellular antioxidant. So we can have glutathione kind of floating around in our serum, but if it's not getting into the cell, it's really not going to be doing much. So very interesting finding there. We also saw in that study a 25% reduction in oxidative stress and a 400% increase in natural killer cell function. So very immune supportive as well. So that was a 2-week study. Very profound results there. Now, in terms of just key takeaways here, mitochondria are functioning far beyond energy metabolism. They're really controlling cellular adaptation, survival, communication. And we know that mitochondrial dysfunction is a central driver in many chronic conditions. So this can be anywhere from fatigue to neurodegeneration to metabolic disorders, mental health. It really spans so many different systems in the body. So important to support those mitochondria and those mitochondrial membranes. So maintaining that membrane integrity is really important for their functional efficiency and resistance to damage, with glutathione, of course, as well, and proper antioxidant balance. So including kind of membrane supportive phospholipids in our formulas, glutathione, CoQ10, PQQ, all of these can really make a well-rounded mitochondrial support formula to really support that performance and resilience overall. All right. So we can open it up for some Q&A now. I can't hear you, Dr. Holly.
I used to wear a t-shirt that said you're on, but I guess I should put it back on. All right. Sorry about that. I haven't made that mistake in a long time, but I'm sure that we'll never get used to it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know we go through a lot of information in a short amount of time. You did a great job. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I'm super excited about. Okay. So first, in cases of fatigue-related disorders, how do you distinguish between whether it's mitochondrial dysfunction, which obviously signs and symptoms, clinical presentation can overlap with things like the adrenal thyroid axis? It's different.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of overlap in symptoms there, kind of non-specific. We get a lot of fatigue, of course. So it's really rarely kind of a one test answer. All three are going to influence energy production. Really clinically, if somebody has adequate thyroid hormone levels and adrenal function, but still reports this kind of unrelenting fatigue, you might start looking at mitochondria if they have things like poor exercise tolerance, muscle fatigue, and out of proportion to the effort that they put in, delayed recovery, even post-exertional fatigue overall. So, and on the lab side, things like organic acids testing, which I believe was just spoken about, can kind of flag Krebs cycle blockages or high oxidative stress markers. And sometimes we'll see that normal cortisol and TSH, but organic acids or even lactate and pyruvate ratios clearly will point to inefficient mitochondrial ATP production. So that might be where you kind of shift your focus toward mitochondrial repair and nutrient repletion. But really, mitochondrial dysfunction, as I kind of talked about earlier, underlies many different pathologies. And so we really can support the body at a cellular level. And I think a lot of times that's always warranted. So really important to look at that.
Great. Okay. So almost like working downstream in order to care for things that are even higher upstream. Got it. All right. What do you think the biggest gap is between the science of mitochondrial health and what are seeing in current clinical practice?
Mhm. Yeah, so it seems like often mitochondria are supported kind of late in the game.
Mm,
Dysfunction is already advanced. So the science does show us that they're central to so many different conditions. Again, mitochondrial dysfunction related to metabolic syndrome, neurodegeneration, mental health disorders. But in practice, mitochondrial support is almost overlooked or viewed as kind of specialty care instead of a foundational pillar, oftentimes. And so, another kind of gap there is that most conventional care will focus on ATP output, but neglecting the importance of that membrane integrity, that redox balance. And so we tend to treat them when they're already dysfunctional versus supporting their ongoing repair and protection. So really closing that gap would mean, using mitochondrial health strategies proactively and holistically, not just reactively. So that I think is an important thing. And I think it's very up and coming. Practitioners are, looking into it more and more. But certainly I think it can be prioritized even further.
I think so too. I mean, I think you have such a great point there because I mean, think about every single cell in our body and how it affects every single system in our body, and then that mitochondria in every single cell in our body. If we start there, maybe with all of the chronic issues that are going on and our modern day environment and such that are impacting it, that this might be a place that we want to think about first before, a full adrenal thing or a thyroid thing. Obviously, everything together. But I'm going to keep going because we've got a lot of juicy, great questions. So here's a question. So if somebody has both MTHFR, right? So C677T. Now I don't know if it's homozygous, heterozygous, and A129BS or 8S. How can these affect mitochondrial health? So these are obviously genetic variants that are easy to understand and test. But when it comes to mitochondria, what do you think?
Yeah, so I've definitely read about this in the past that, having not only heterozygous, but homozygous obviously makes it even more intense. If we have methylation issues, then, that is going to lead to mitochondrial dysfunction. Um, what those mechanisms are underlying, there's a lot out there on this, but I think it all kind of comes back to that oxidative stress and inflammation picture.
Okay.
So, when that's kind of at the core of what's going on, that's going to lead to all of those downstream effects. And so I think, it's certainly applicable and definitely, even when I've looked into certain underlying pathologies, I'm always finding more and more mechanisms behind it. So, I don't know kind of off the top of my head how I would explain that, on a deep level,
Sure.
but certainly I think it's worth kind of looking into and digging into because certainly I know that it can have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the knee bone is connected to the thigh bone type of thing, right?
Right.
Yeah. All right. You mentioned in the study, did you remember the dose of glutathione that was actually used?
Yes. Yep. It was 450 milligrams in that study.
Okay. And that was an oral supplementation?
Yep. So it was oral liposomal formula.
Okay. So is there a role in glycine and NAD supplementation? Do you have to take really high doses of these to actually increase intracellular glutathione production?
Glycine and NAD.
Correct.
So you're talking instead of just supplementing glutathione, essentially.
Yeah, so maybe precursors, this is just a question as far as glycine and amino acid, obviously, and NAD supplementation.
Yeah. So I think, sometimes we have to, our body has to go through a lot of different reactions to actually kind of create glutathione. And some people have issues with that. In fact, a lot of people have issues with that. I'm blanking on kind of the percentage of the population that does, but that's why, you always try to push just taking glutathione itself because it's already, made and your body can actually use it, especially formulas that, are intracellular that actually get into the cell. So I think it just kind of depends on the individual body's efficiency in creating that glutathione. And so I think it could be quite variable person to person on how efficiently they're actually using those nutrients to create that master antioxidant.
Okay, got it. Great. There are so many questions coming in for you, and I know that we are limited on time. So I know you're going to get a chance to answer these when we send them your way after it. I'm going to ask you one more, if you can, and just like if we can make it brief, could you talk a little bit about mitochondria, a little bit further about mitochondrial function and calcium homeostasis, and then we'll wrap it up and we'll get you these other questions. There's some really great ones, and I'm so sorry we didn't have time to get to them.
Yeah, so I like to think about mitochondria almost like a sponge. So when we have too much calcium floating around, it'll kind of suck it up. And then when we need calcium, it'll kind of release it. And so, that's a really important function to be able to, control, heart function and muscle function and cellular signaling. And when we have mitochondrial dysfunction, this is kind of just spilling out. And, we can have all kinds of issues, of course, downstream of that. So, that's kind of the analogy that I like to use, is that it's so well controlled. But, we know that mitochondrial dysfunction is so prevalent with these underlying pathologies. And so that's where we start looking into, muscular dysfunction, heart health, nerve health, all of these issues that can result from poor calcium balance in the body. And so, yeah, definitely an important function there that goes awry when we have those membranes out of tact and kind of just spilling all of these components inside the mitochondria into the system.
Got you. All right. So, Dr. Douglas, thank you. We've got some other questions coming at you, and I know that they will be answered by you. Other membrane components like plasmalogens and such, and then chronic regional pain syndrome. So if we didn't answer your question, and if you have product specific questions as well, right? So because we're linking a good laboratory analysis along with some fixes and such, you can reach out directly at the email indicated on the slide. And again, we are going to take a 5-minute break, and then you'll come back to join me and we're going to pull it all together. How about that? All right. So don't forget to exit again this session and then go back to the main menu and just click on that other one, and we'll see you soon. All right. 5 minutes. We'll talk to you later. Thank you so much.